Meet Matthew Pettit, a young man determined to be a cut above the rest in the butchery game.
There's a lot of aspects in the trade that drew me towards it. The displaying of meat, cutting it up, serving customers, seeing them satisfied with the end product.
The 19-year-old has already been able to stake a serious claim for superiority. This week he was voted the Devro National Butchery Champion. Although hampered by a broken leg, Matthew wasn't afraid to hop in for his chop, and his brilliance with the blade saw him emerge with a major slice of victory.
Personality has a lot to do with it, but in the practical section they're looking for cleanliness in the handling of the meat, and displaying the meat has quite a lot to do with it.
Matthew will soon embark on a study tour of the New Zealand meat industry and one day hopes to own his own butchery business.
Six people have died and 200 have been injured in accidents on this strip of road between Cessnock and Testers Hollow in the last 5.5 years. The Minister for Roads, Wal Murray, and local member Bob Roberts inspected the deteriorating surface this morning.
The road from Cessnock through to Curry is the worst bitumen and concrete road in New South Wales.
Today, the Minister announced that after September next year, $11.5 million will be available to upgrade roads in the Cessnock area. However, he criticised the Cessnock City Council for not having already spent $700,000 on improving roads in the area.
In this particular case, I do have a problem, and I just wish they'd get along and spend the money, because we're not going to put more money in on top of money that is unspent. If you can't spend the first lot, there's no point in giving any more.
Cessnock Mayor Marie Callaghan blames the Roads and Traffic Authority for the delay. She says the council has completed the design plan for the road and it's just waiting for the Minister's Department to give council the green light. On the other side of town, a windfall for punters. The Minister for Racing, Bob Rowland-Smith, announced $1.1 million will be spent upgrading the Cessnock racecourse. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
At least 90,000 elephants every year die for the ivory trade. Many tens of thousands of mammals go the same way. Millions of reptiles, 4 million live birds.
The import and export of endangered species is a $4 to $5 billion a year trade. This collection of animal skins and products represents a fraction of what's seized in Australia alone each year.
Everything you see here has been taken off travellers who've come into Australia who were trying to bring it into the country. They often just didn't know that what they'd bought was a prohibited import.
Well, how would people bring in something the size of the grizzly?
Well, you certainly wouldn't try and bring it in under your coat, would you? It came in a container, I believe.
Australia's own native animals fetch high prices overseas, but of the thousands smuggled out each year, only a few survive.
You stuff them into a case, and cases go out with 30, 40 animals in them. About 90% of those animals are doomed to die before they reach a buyer.
Brett Rolls got the Gold Coast on the board after the Knights gave away a penalty within range of the posts. Gordon equalised and then teamed with Doyle to open up the Seagulls. And in the 17th minute, Gonzalez scored the try for the Gold Coast. Both sides were making plenty of breaks but couldn't finish off. But a minute from half-time, the Knights finally put something together. With the Gold Coast leading 10-6 at the break, Miller gave away a silly penalty and it was 12-6. The crowd were giving the Knights heaps of support and David Boyd sent the Red and Blues away. Scores were deadlocked and Steve Linnane was inches away from giving the Knights the lead in the match. And then the Gold Coast strolled over and it looked like it was all over. With time running out, the Knights looked to have scored through Woods. But referee Annesley ruled the pass from Hagan to Edwards was forward and their last chance had gone begging. The Gold Coast home deserved winners 16-12.
He might be flat on his back, but Knight speedster Ashley Gordon is racing the clock in a bid to overcome an ankle injury and take his place against the Magpies in the match of the round this Sunday.
The ligaments on either side of the ankle, and hopefully I'll just keep getting physio and it'll get better.
If Gordon does recover, it's likely Gary Worth will be back in reserve grade. The only other change to the side embarrassed by the Gold Coast is the inclusion of under-21s hooker Max Chapman. This tackle left David Mullane with an excruciating groin injury, and League Supremo John Quayle has summoned Seagulls second rower Keith G before the judiciary tonight to answer charges stemming from the incident. Despite winning just one game in the last month, the Knights continue to show faith in their team and their tactics.
Our philosophy to think the forwards do their job first before we can get it, and it's important to dominate the forwards, otherwise the backs really shouldn't have the ball because there won't be any room if the forwards don't dominate.
Union delegates filed into the Wyong Tennis Club today, hoping to shut the door on the Greiner government's reform package. The coalition plans to have the state's 6 power stations compete against each other for the right to supply our electricity needs. Unions say it's an ill-disguised attempt to make the newer, more efficient stations attractive to the private sector while leaving the older facilities all but idle.
We'd be looking at the power stations of Munmora and Vales Point at least. If not closing, certainly being devastated to the extent of some 500 or 600 jobs.
Shadow Energy Minister Pat Rogan told the meeting the government was determined to push ahead with its ideology, although the facts suggested the industry's performance was more than acceptable.
You would have had privatisation now, except you're being too efficient.
He quoted a recent government report that showed electricity charges in New South Wales were the lowest on the Australian mainland and about half those experienced by our major trading partners. Although visiting the Hunter today, Minerals and Energy Minister Neil Pickard refused to comment on the claims. Unions voted to call for a meeting with whichever party wins Saturday's poll and refused to rule out strike action if they weren't satisfied with the outcome.
This is always the thorny question, do power industry workers have the right to withdraw their labour? We believe they do.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Coal mining in the Hunter is a multi-billion-dollar industry creating more than 10,000 jobs. But as mining executives point out, companies are limited by the lease. Once this $6 million dragline hits a line on the map, the work stops. But a unique new system announced today will change that.
Two operations that weren't necessarily money spinners are now going to be very, very valuable commercial operations.
Executives from United and Wombo swapped leases today, giving Wombo the right to continue open cut onto United, United allowed to mine underground onto Wombo. The system rationalises the industry, giving massive setups the opportunity to continue into areas which the neighbouring lessee may not be able to mine. For Wombo mining alone, it's added 15 years' life to the company, saving 200 jobs. Also today, the Minister for Minerals and Energy, Neil Pickard, announced a $500,000 feasibility study for Wombo to build a private power station. The station planned to run on waste products from the mine.
The opening of the MSB Waterways' new office on Hunter Street was promoted by the authority as proof of its commitment to becoming more accessible to the region's boat users. But the Waterways Authority also recognised its role in tightening up boat safety. Authority Chairman John Barraclough said the opening of the office coincided with increases in patrol strengths on local waterways, a move he says is long overdue.
And it appears to me that more and more people, because of the activities like the Boating Industry Association, more and more people are being encouraged to spend particularly weekends on the waterways.
The Ngluka tragedy and the death in controversial circumstances of a speedboat driver on the Myall River in March have highlighted the need for more safety on the water. MSB Waterways will put extra patrol officers and staff on Lake Macquarie, Newcastle Harbour and at Port Stephens in the Myall Lakes. New navigation systems are also being installed on most waterway approaches. The new office was officially opened by Member for Newcastle George Keegan, and the first customers were at the counter before formalities concluded. MSB Waterways already believes its customers are more safety-minded, and they say the extra patrols will serve more to remind boat operators of their responsibilities than to enforce the rules.
While coach Ken Cole relaxed on the tennis court, young gun Chris Steele was concentrating on the nets at the Broadmeadows Stadium. Cole hopes Steele's enthusiasm will be enough to spark a more committed performance from the Falcons when they take on Southern Melbourne this Saturday.
Well, I'll probably be marking Tucker. He's a new 6'7" forward from America, the new import, and he's been shooting really well, getting offensive rebounds and doing a good defensive job, so I hope that I can just kind of snuff him out a bit.
The two sides fought out a thriller in the opening round of the NBL, with the Saints prevailing by just 2 points. Since then, their form couldn't have been more different. The youngsters from Melbourne have stamped themselves real contenders, while the Falcons have rarely looked like fulfilling their potential and hit rock bottom against Illawarra last week. Steele admits it will take a major form reversal to see the Falcons home.
They play really, really well as a team, so if we can get it together early, we've got the big names, Mike Johnson, James Bullock and Jerry Everett, Al Green as well lately. We can just blow them off the court, so if we do play as a team, I think we will win.
One man looking forward to the tussle is young centre Grant Kruger. He suffered at the hands of NBL hardheads Norman Taylor and Chuck Harmison last week and can't wait to mix it in the paint with the less experienced Saints.
It'll be fun. They're not as aggressive players as Southern Melbourne is what like a Norman Taylor would be, but it's still going to be a tough game.
At the age of 10, the Labor candidate for Cessnock, Stan Neely, contracted polio. It caused the muscles in his right shoulder to waste away, leaving him with only restricted movement in that arm. Stan Neely owns a car but doesn't drive. To get around the electorate, he relies on public transport and the goodwill of family and friends. Cessnock was a Labor stronghold until the boundaries were dramatically changed before the last election. The Liberals won by 275 votes, and it's expected to be as close this time around. On the eve of the election, competition for those votes has hit a low point. A member of the Liberal Party has distributed postcards to voters in the Singleton area. He claims the ALP candidate would not be an effective Member of Parliament without a car or a licence. Bob Roberts says he didn't authorise the postcards, but he believes an effective Member of Parliament needs to be mobile.
Now, if a constituent asks to see me, and many have at short notice, you have to go and see them, sometimes in their own home or a nursing home, and you have to have mobility, and it's of primary importance.
Stan Neely was the member for 7 years before Bob Roberts won the seat.
I've got a disability there which I've never had in the past, and I believe that I'm entitled to live a life with dignity, and I believe that at 49 years of age and being successful to get through life so far, there was no need to bring this out publicly.
In the 11 years Newcastle City Council has been planning for a new civic precinct, the question of what kind of facelift the area should undergo has never been far from controversy. Two of the major developments, an international hotel and a tiered tower, never got beyond the model stage, and the fate of the Frederick Ash Building and the Clarendon Hotel has been hotly debated. But in his report to go before Council on Tuesday night, Town Clerk Barry Lewis recommends the Frederick Ash Building be recycled for use by Council staff. The Lord Mayor John McNaughton supports the recommendation.
It absolutely should stay. It's a magnificent building and an example, the only remaining example of that sort of warehouse within the inner city.
Mr Lewis would not give us an interview on camera, but in his report the Town Clerk said there's a need for Council to show leadership in the redevelopment of the civic precinct. Now to date, that leadership has had to contend with development projects falling through and has been characterised by about faces, including that concerning the fate of the Frederick Ash Building.
We cannot overlook the fact that the buildings in that area were purchased for one reason and one reason only, and that was to demolish and for the building to be, or for the whole area to be redeveloped as a major drawcard for the inner city area of Newcastle.
Alderman Saunders says the building should be demolished because without clearing the area as originally planned, the chances for development are lessened.
The danger is that people will start to concentrate too much on what is there rather than seeing the prospect of the future. We need in Newcastle to have a vision for the future and to be prepared to work to see that vision through.
The party faithful took up their positions outside Hunter polling booths early in the day, bracing themselves for the morning rush. But it never really came. Voters arrived in a steady trickle at most stations. Even in Cessnock, the state's most marginal electorate, where the ALP requires a swing of less than 1% to regain the seat, there was little excitement.
Yeah, I think you better have the right one.
In just over 3 years, it seems the political climate of the Hunter has changed dramatically. During the last election, the area was a hotbed of seething discontent and emotion, while this campaign has featured little controversy and, for those not directly involved, even less interest. The numerous visits by party leaders and high-profile ministers have apparently failed to produce a single burning political issue. What did you think the major issues of the election campaign were?
Just the small businesses at the moment.
What did you think the main issues of this election campaign were?
I really don't want to talk to you.
Well, we should get rid of the bloody lot of them.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Ironically, Peter Pickover's final pre-recorded radio program will go to air on 2NUR-FM tomorrow morning, the last of a series called Beauty That Endures. He described it as a tapestry of words and music based on the Quiet Hour format he presented for more than 40 years. Pickover came out of semi-retirement in 1988 when these pictures were taken to join 2NUR. Before that, he'd been involved in tourism promotion on the Central Coast and for a short while had a property at Upper Chichester. He became known as Uncle Peter early on, presenting children's programs on 2KO, but in the 50s moved to the other local commercial stations, NX and HD. Pickover was the son of a Welsh pastor. His mother died when he was quite young and he never married. His familiar sign-off became a tradition and will pass into history just before 11 o'clock tomorrow morning.
History may never repeat, but there's a sense of déjà vu when comparing the Prince of Wales of the 1920s with the look of the new. After the Prince fell victim to the 1989 earthquake, the 6 co-owners and architect Ron Lang decided to return to plans of the past to design the pub of the future. The result is a $2 million watering hole that provides the best of both old and new worlds. There's grand staircases and large verandas, inspired by the days when local miners frequented the pub. And there's a few features the diggers wouldn't have dreamed of in a month of Saturdays, a skylight-covered bistro and a bright chalk sign designed in Adelaide. After some last-minute mopping up, the new Prince of Wales was officially opened today by Lord Mayor John McNaughton. Since the first Prince of Wales opened in 1876, the pub has been a focal point in the lives of Merewether people, and it's had its fair share of trials. Rebuilt in 1916, flooded in the early 20s, then the earthquake. Co-owner Ross Roddenby believes it's a case of third time lucky with the new building, but should the earth shake again, the Prince will be prepared.
Our foundations now go 30 feet into the ground with timber foundations. They've been capped. Then there's a steel structure where, should anything happen, we'll all have an allowance for movement.
The Hunter Economic Development Council was established by the Greiner government to oversee and encourage development and business in the region. To do that, it has put together a development strategy, which it believes will see Newcastle into the next decade. Like any business document, however, the strategy needs selling, so a business prospectus for interstate, national and international companies is to be developed, which shows the Hunter at its best. 2 weeks ago, the HEDC called for tenders to design and print that 8-page promotional document. The council received tenders from 4 local companies and a further 4 from Wollongong.
Well, the basic response was that 3 Illawarra companies came in best on price, in fact far better in some ways, better than Sydney, certainly better than Newcastle.
Mr Chapello says the prices from Newcastle were 50% higher than those from the Illawarra region. So were you surprised by the difference in price?
I was, quite frankly, and that was the reason for my trip to Wollongong, to just make sure that we were talking apples and apples.
While the council is supposed to be the body selling the region, it says it has been forced to take its business elsewhere.
I'm here to support and promote competitive industry, and the facts of life all over Australia and the world now that if you're not competitive, then you need to get competitive or change business.